everyone, this is Kale Mary.
And this is Soda.
As probably long awaited with our listeners, we are going to review the second season of Strange New Worlds. Now, luckily, this season was already produced before all the strikes that happened in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, but on the other hand, that means that the wait between season 2 and 3 will be so much longer.
It's so true. I mean, I'm trying not to think about the negative of that, meaning that season 3 may not come out next year. It's kind of
Yeah,
daunting.
it might take a while. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's not as if they had to or could only they couldn't air what they had because they were almost done with it when the strike started, and then therefore they could not air anything. That would have been
yeah,
a horrible position.
yeah.
Then we would be down season 2 and a long wait for season 3. Son and I are we're going to talk about obviously we're going to go episode by episode, and then we're going to kind of talk about some of the themes going on across the whole season. But to start with, Soda, what did you think about season 2?
I enjoyed it. I want to start by saying that I enjoyed it. I did not think it was as good as season 1, but it is still a very good show.
I could not agree more. I give it a thumbs up. I don't think it lived up to the hype of season 1. I maybe have a little more heartburn with some things in season 2, but it's a great show, and you can see how much the actors put into it, the writing that goes into it. Still continues to be probably the quality like Star Trek show outside of the animated Lower Decks.
The quality live action Star Trek show.
Live action, yes, well, that's what I was going for. Live action Star Trek show. Actually, it's the only one right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is still season 5 of Discovery that will also come after, well, whenever the strikes will be over.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I was happy with season 2 in general, and I would watch season 3.
Me too, absolutely.
Let's just start with the first episode.
Yes, it's called The Broken Circle. Interestingly enough, season 1 ended on a sort of cliffhanger, and while this episode does touch on it, they don't immediately go into resolving it.
For those of you who haven't seen spoiler or season 1, spoilers. This whole
Yeah,
podcast. Where we left off with season 1 finale was number 1, Una was arrested,
yeah,
and we kind of open with that in the first episode, but only from the perspective that she's still in jail and probably going to trial, and she does not have representation, and Pike is doing his best to help her find that representation. So Pike essentially removes himself from the plot of episode 1 by going
yeah.
off screen and leaving his ship under the purview of Mr. Spock, and some things happen. Namely that a urgent distress signal comes in from a colony that the Klingons are having their turn watching over, and it's from La'an, who, as we know from season 1, has taken a leave of absence from Starfleet for personal
Yeah.
reasons. And yeah, essentially, Spock comes up with the great idea to steal the Enterprise.
Very original, very original.
Very original, and it's in the middle of being, let's just say it's in space dock. It's been like retrofitted. It's going under some kind of look over by the engineering experts at the space station. And so they acquire a temporary chief engineer who happens to be Lanthanite, And yeah, they managed to escape space dock pretty ingeniously, and then go off to
Yeah.
the colony, the border world where the Klingons are, and figure out what's going on with La'an.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lanthanites are a new species.
Mm-hmm.
They've never been introduced before. They're basically, I mean, they're very similar to I don't remember their name, but the species that like Guinan is one of. They're just like very long living. They look like humans. They kind of live on Earth and just observe things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why she isn't just the same species as Guinan. Why did they have to make her a new species?
Yeah. And she's the species they're supposed to have been on Earth for thousands of years undetected as an alien species. They just intermingled with the humans, and no one knew the difference.
Oh, Guinan species is called Alorian.
Mm.
Alorian, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't see any difference between them. That why make her a Lampanite? That's kind of my question.
Yeah. Um. So they arrive at this essentially like this treaty planet.
Yeah,
It is a leftover like colony world from the Klingon War. The Federation and Klingons have agreed to take shifts on the planet, which I mean, wonderful. And it's the
because it has some sort of resource that they're
right,
sharing. Yeah,
and it's the Klingon shift. And so really, La'an, who is on that planet, is in a sense cannot be known as Starfleet, right? Because Starfleet should not be there, and that is why when Spock raised this issue of we got a distress call from one of our officers who says the Klingons are up to no good, they're like, don't go over there. You know,
yeah,
we can't break the treaty, we'll end up in war again.
yeah,
They go over there clandestinely. They're in disguise. They meet up with La'an. They learn that there is a faction of Klingons who are looking to restart the war and have built a Federation ship under the surface of the planet and are preparing to pretend like they are the Federation attacking the Klingons around the planet and restart the war.
yeah,
So naturally, it is up to the Enterprise crew to stop them. And Binga and Chapel, yeah, end up on this, let's say, fake or this Federation ship decoy. It's a really hard choice for Spock, right? Because ultimately they should destroy this fake ship to prevent it from firing on a Klingon cruiser that would start the war.
yeah,
But they suspect Mbinga and Chapel are on there, and so Spock has to make the tough call to blow up the ship. But luckily, Mbinga and Chapel escape, and they're reunited, and they have successfully diverted a war.
this is the first episode. I don't think we discussed it really in last season. First episode that really touches on Mbenga and Chapel being like veterans from the Klingon Federation War,
Right.
which will be kind of a big plot point in this season going
Mm-hmm.
forward, especially from Benga. Mostly because, I kind of feel like it was kind of a problem. The first season kind of blew all of Benga's story, like gave him a very complete story with his daughter, and now they're kind of oh crap, we need to find like a new story for him because we kind of finished it off in one season.
Yeah.
Um, so they gave him the Klingon story. I'm not sure I like it as much as the daughter thing. I think the resolution for the story of his daughter was way too fast. Um, I did not like it the way they went about it last season. But this is, I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I would have been okay if they had just left it at, like, look, they were on the front lines of the Klingon War. A lot of officers were, medical personnel were, and it was a dark time, and they had to learn how to defend themselves against the enemy and also save lives. That to me makes sense from a background perspective. if you were probably an officer during in the Federation during the Klingon War, you probably were some way involved in the war. But
Yeah.
where they take the particularly Mbinga's role during that time, I'm not a fan of. But I think we can talk
Yeah.
about that when we get to that
That
revelation.
yeah. And another thing that I'm sorry if I sound too negative, but another thing that just pops out for me in this episode that is a holdover from last season. Aside from the cliffhanger last season, where
Mhm.
number one was taken, to prison or jail or whatever, she was arrested. The other kind of plot point in the finale of last season is, as you mentioned, Lan taking a leave, and
Yeah.
she immediately comes back the first episode of season two. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It felt like kind of like why have her take a leave if she's not going to like be absent for a while.
Right. I think part of the point of the leave, besides helping this victim of the Gorn who was like herself find her parents, is it's supposed to be maybe sort of an emotional journey for La'an off screen, but we don't get
Exactly.
that. We
Yeah.
get that much later in another form.
Yeah. She just immediately comes back to
Yeah.
the show, to the ship. Like, yeah. It seems kind of pointless.
So the other thing to mention, kind of a sort of an effect of season one, is that in season one, Spock had to essentially like release his emotion in order
Yeah.
to fight the Gorn. He's not been able to put the emotions back in the box since. So when we open and see in this first episode, he's with Mbinga and he's like, "Look, I'm having a difficult time controlling my emotions," and of course, Mbinga recommends some musical therapy, but we see that Spock is not as controlled as he was in season one.
Yeah.
So that's going to play into what happens with him.
Yeah. Um, I didn't really like. I admit, didn't feel this was a very strong opening episode. It was interesting. I enjoyed the plot with the Klingons, but apart from the issues that I mentioned, there's also that like having Spock, be in charge of the Enterprise and
Hmm.
you know try his hand at being a captain. That's kind of a plot that has been done.
Yeah.
Um, it's not new. Stealing the Enterprise is also not new. And like, yeah, those are cute references, but they run into this problem, the prequel problem, which is that you kind of have to like tell stories about the characters before we met them, but avoid repeating stories that are already told with them.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of I feel like they fell into this trap here that they kind of rehash a lot of things we already saw in different iterations.
Yeah, there really wasn't anything original in this story. Even the plot with the Klingons wanting to like restart the war, we had a version of that even in Abrams' verse,
Yeah,
right? Where you have
yeah,
actually someone in Starfleet wanting to restart the Klingon war. I think had we continued along that vein of this secret, like there being secret factions who want to go back to war with Klingons, had that continued into the rest of the season, maybe it could have justified that as a plot point in the first episode, but it really was purely to introduce or to remind viewers that the Klingon War had happened and that the ramifications for our characters would pop up
yeah,
for those who had been involved heavily in the Klingon War. And of course, it was also to give a reason for us to get a temporary chief engineer, Pella.
yeah,
So that's episode one in a nutshell. It's not a strong jumping off point. It's just clearly a setup to bring people back together and to introduce certain subplots that are going to play into the rest of the season.
yes. This so anything more to add about this episode?
No, I don't think we have anything else about episode one.
Okay. So episode two is the actual continuation of the cliffhanger from season one. Um, Pike recruits an Illyrian kind of civil rights attorney to defend number one, Una, in her case, to try to get her to stay in Starfleet, let Starfleet keep her, basically. Una is, Una is charged with, lying. She is Illyrian, which means she was genetically modified, which means she can't serve in Starfleet, but she served anyway because she didn't tell them. Um, and basically, this is a courtroom drama episode. Mostly,
Yes.
we have Una defending her case. We have her. Apparently, she knew the civil rights attorney. They were childhood friends. We have Pike. We have Laan. A lot of high feelings, a lot of tension. Typical courtroom drama episode. Not a lot of action.
Yes, that's pretty much it. The whole episode is about challenging the Federation's laws
Yeah,
that stem from a time where they had the eugenics wars and augmented humans attempted to take control. And it just plays into far into the future, how those laws have impacted certain minorities, specifically like the Illyrians, who have been ostracized, sort of um, forced out of their homes, forced to hide who they are, etc., etc. So it's really, like you said, it's a courtroom drama, but it's about a very specific concern and really challenging like what the Federation should stand for.
yeah,
They're not perfect. They may have these types of laws that actually inspire like hatred and even abuse to minorities, and just challenging the status quo, like, is that really what the federate does that live up to the Federation's mission? And look what impact it's had on people's lives. And Una being, of
yeah.
course, the prime example of from her childhood all the way to up how she had to hide, but why she still wanted to join Starfleet.
Exactly. Basically, it reveals that the utopian future of Star Trek may not
Mhm.
be still has biases, still has bigotry,
Mhm.
still has problems. Um, it's kind of depressing if you think about it, because the main reason we know about the ban against, um, genetically modified people is because of the Deep Space Nine's plot with Bashir, who turns out to be genetically modified human,
Yeah.
but genetically modified, and we learn through his character about the struggle. But if you think about Deep Space Nine, takes place like 100 years after Strange New Worlds, so like nothing changed, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it is depressing, but I mean, it was a very emotional episode, right? I mean, it
yeah,
probably
yes,
resonates even with the audience because essentially, is you can't categorically write off a whole species slash race, and you can't force them to deny their culture. That should not be part of a utopia, and one that looks
yes,
seeks to respect and preserve all cultures and all walks of life.
yes. And it was a pretty big episode regarding, learning about the character of Una herself.
Hmm.
Like, where did she grow up, and the struggles that she faced. It,
Yeah.
it really revealed a lot about her.
It was purely an episode focused on Una, show and just to one show like you said, her background, where she comes from, what drives her to be the officer that she is, but also just to show that she has, as who she is, garnered the respect of her crew
Yeah,
and earned her place in Starfleet.
yeah.
So I call it the Una episode.
Yeah, it pretty much is.
Like you said, no action.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yes, sometimes an episode can stand without action.
That's
Um,
very true. I mean, it started to remind me of like the court martial.
well, I mean, I guess it was inspired by it, and there has been a
Yeah,
few episodes throughout Star Trek that were like courtroom drama
yeah.
episodes.
But like bringing in like the one attorney who could probably defend the case,
Yeah,
finding the loophole to defend the case, sort of like the surprise twist with Una being the one who reported herself because she was tired of hiding.
yeah,
So,
true.
as a courtroom drama, it was good.
It was, yeah. I think it was a good episode. I liked it better than the first episode, but I think again, I like this episode, but I think Star Trek did, better courtroom dramas in the past.
Okay. So, should we move on?
Yeah,
Episode 3.
yeah. Last episode was titled Ad Astra per Aspera, and the episode's free title is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
It's all about tomorrow. No, just kidding. Well,
Yeah.
it kind of is. It's a time travel episode.
Yes.
So it starts where La'an encounters a random person who magically shows up on the Enterprise and gives La'an a mysterious device, and then the next thing you know, La'an is on a different Enterprise.
Yes.
And we are to infer from that that something has happened to change the timeline, such that she is in a world that does not have a federation. It
Yep.
is still the United Earth. Nobody knows who she is. Vulcans are known, but they're again not really dealing directly with the United Earth. There is no Spock on the ship, for example. And of course, the ship she is on is still captained by James Kirk. And she has to convince him, of course, that, she is a time traveler, not by her choice, and that this timeline is not supposed to, is not hers, and she would like to fix it so she can go back to where she needs to be, and things can go back to how they were. Of course, Kirk is a little
Yeah.
skeptical, as anybody would be,
Yeah.
and naturally they end up time traveling again to Toronto, old Earth,
It's nice.
modern
It's
day.
nice that it's nice that they actually say it's Toronto and don't just shoot in Toronto and say it's New York or something,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they usually do that.
Kirk and La'an are on their own. They're in Toronto. They're trying to figure out what is the triggering event that changes the timeline. And they uncover a conspiracy plot involving the Romulans.
Yep.
And also involving La'an's ancestor, Khan Noonien Singh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they managed to, let's just say they managed to stop the triggering event.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and everything gets right set, but Kirk dies, and
Well, the other Kirk dies. Our Kirk
the
is okay. So
the not La'an's universe or timeline
yeah.
Kirk dies, but not before
Yeah.
she obviously bonds with him during their trip. And yeah, it's just your typical kind of like time travel divert a
Yeah.
disastrous future slash a blip in the timeline kind of episode.
Exactly. I really like this episode. I thought it was like the first episode that I just really really enjoyed. Um, I liked the explosion. Basically, Laan has to contend with, um, you know, because the show touches about genetically modified people, and Laan is, of course, the something granddaughter times I don't know how of Kanyonin Singh, um, who was, of course, genetically modified. He and people like him are the reason that humans are so scared of genetically modified humans. Um, and she has to contend, with his name, with his legacy. it goes before her. Everywhere she goes, people recognize the name. And this episode, because basically the triggering event, they have Kirk and Lan have to stop a Romulan, time traveling Romulan, I think,
Yeah.
from yeah, he was right. They were time traveling. They have to stop a Romulan from killing Khan as when he was a kid, basically. And of course, Lan, on one hand, it's like the this this morality play of, oh, would you kill Hitler as a baby if you had a chance?
Yeah.
And on one hand, Lan would like, but on the other hand, it's also like, would you change the future? Would you erase yourself from existence? Because she's his granddaughter. Um, and because she meets Kirk from this other universe. Kirk from the other universe is from a universe where they did manage to kill Khan as a child, and he doesn't know her. He doesn't know anything about her from her name. So for the first time ever, she gets to be a person that no one like has any preconceived notion about.
Right.
And she really likes it, and she and Kirk, of course, bond because Kirk is charming. We all know Kirk is charming. But yeah, it's I really like. I felt it was a better, if last episode was a very deep exploration of Una's character, this was a very deep exploration of Lan's character, and I felt it was done better because it was more show and less tell.
Yeah. I marginally enjoyed it. I won't say I loved it because at the end it left me really confused. Perhaps I should have gone back and rewatched it, but I think the explanation of the Romulan being there to kill Khan, but having missed the opportunity in the 90s, and it's somehow like 30 years later, the whole that whole piece of it really left me confused. I think I was kind of baffled when the episode ended.
Yeah, because in the original series, they said that the eugenics wars happened in the 90s,
Yeah.
which I'm kind of upset they didn't just skip it because, like, I guess they're trying to say to like pretend like like Star Trek universe is kind of in line with our universe, but
Yeah.
I would be okay if it wasn't. I wouldn't care. Um, so they kind of made an excuse that could move the timeline a bit forward. Oh, the actually in the 21st century, it happened in the 21st century. It didn't happen in the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were parts of it that I really enjoyed. I mean, obviously, getting to see this sort of different Kirk who hasn't lived in a utopian, idealistic kind of society, but has been part of this more militaristic United Earth.
Yeah.
Getting to see them in Toronto in the 21st century, watching Kirk just be himself and like earn money by playing chess and just the kind of the shenanigans that come along with time traveling. But then also, I thought it was kind of smart to put in Pella. So
Yeah.
La'an realizing that, hey, there is somebody I do know in the 21st century. It's the Lanthanite, who's the temporary
Yeah.
chief engineer of the Enterprise. And just kind of using that person, just being able to bring in another character that people know and not just having it be like La'an and Kirk. But, from a humorous standpoint, right? Because Pella is not an engineer like she is in the next
Yeah.
century. And she's a black market antiques dealer.
Yeah.
And it just makes for it being really entertaining. So as like a time travel episode, it I don't know, it kind of reminds me of like the city on the edge of forever. I like that
Yeah.
about it.
It was very similar in tone. Yeah.
Yeah. And with trying to prevent well, in the city on the edge of forever, they were there to actually not change the events of the
Well, yeah,
time.
but yeah, that's what they were doing here. They try to prevent the Romulan from changing the
You were
timeline.
trying to prevent the Romulan from killing Khan.
Yeah.
So as a time travel episode, it was fair. Although I think the plot of it with the Romulans left me a little confused. I don't know. I initially walked out of it going like, what did I just watch? But I enjoyed it as a La'an episode because she is an original character to Strange New Worlds, and as they continue to build like her background and who she is, and it's interesting to watch that unfold.
Yeah, I agree. Episode 4, Among the Lotus Eaters.
Among the Lotus Eaters.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is. So this is really where um well, it starts out with like Captain Battelle, who we saw in season 1. I'll call it the romantic partner of Pike.
Yeah,
They have a relationship, and we'll see that in other episodes as well. But it starts out with them coming to I think it's Rigel 7
yeah, Rigel 7.
to look at this potential like cultural contamination that's happened on these race called the Kalar. I think that was the name.
Yeah,
Pike had obviously been there before with another crew, and he had lost a lot of crew members. So for him there's a past there going back to this planet, if you will. Everybody's getting prepared to the landing party's getting prepared. Ortega's is happy because she's going to be on the landing party. They're also taking like La'an and Mbinga because they both have combat skills. So they're prepared to kind of like secretively go down to the planet and figure out where the contamination happened and do what they can do to fix that.
yeah,
Of course, Pike being Pike, he likes to try diplomacy first. But he
yes,
recognizes in a situation like this, they need to be able to defend themselves as well because the Kalar have weapons. But anyway, so they need Ortega's turns out can't go on the landing party. She still needs to pilot the ship. She's a little bummed out about that, so she has to stay behind.
yeah,
But everybody else goes down to the planet, and initially Pike meets the let's just say the leader of the Kalar. Okay, and it turns out the contamination is that he left one of his crew members behind.
Well, in all fairness, he thought he was dead.
He thought he was dead. It was one of his yeomen. So
Yeah,
Zach, I think that's his
yeah,
name. And Zach is very bitter about being left behind. And
yeah,
and he also tells Pike, well, you probably shouldn't have come here because there's something here that's going to wipe your memory. There's something about this planet that wipes the memory. So unless you're in this particular compound, you're going to forget who you are. And I think that's hilarious because it's my form of revenge for you leaving me behind.
yeah,
So, like Mbinga, La'an, Pike, being forced outside, and eventually starting to forget who they are. So they just kind of like wake up and they're like, "Who are we? Who are you? I don't know who you are." And
yeah,
yeah, so that's really their struggle. They kind of end up in like a little slave force that's like our prison, like on a prison camp, kind of mining some rock and try to fight with themselves internally to figure out who are they and why are they there? Why do they think they know each other and what are they supposed to be doing? So it ultimately culminates with them trying to storm the compound, and through doing that, La'an gets extremely injured to the point that she could die. So there's more of an urgency to figuring out what they're doing there and how do they remember who they are. Long story short, Pike confronts his former yeoman. They have a fight, and Pike remembers who he is.
this episode is very much in the style of an original series episode,
Yes.
right? Like the story of a Starfleet officer that gets left on a planet and gets corrupted, and takes over the planet. But there are several original series episodes that are just like that.
And also the amnesia part.
Yeah, and I mean,
Even
Rachel
though this is
Seven.
technically not amnesia, it's like a forced melting of the brain.
Yeah, and I mean, Rachel Seven itself was first mentioned in the original series too. So there's that. Yeah, but it is a fun episode. It's like an episode. It's like more a breather, like a self-contained story. It doesn't have anything to do with any larger plots.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's a fun little story. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. It is an opportunity for us to see, one, to also see, like, Mbinga can fight.
Yeah,
So we're starting to see more. The thing about Mbinga is, until we get to a point where we really learn about him, we get parts of his backstory and, like, who he really is trickled throughout the season. This is one of those times. So who
yeah,
is Mbinga when he doesn't even remember that he's a healer? Well, he knows how to fight and defend himself in hand-to-hand combat, for
yeah.
example. I was a little disappointed with La'an. I know we just had a La'an episode, but, like, she very quickly got injured,
That's true.
making that life or death stakes. When you're focusing on what was going on in the planet, right, with the landing party, this was Pike's episode in my mind. He has a hard time trusting his romantic partner, Captain Battelle. Let's put it that way. And perhaps he's not even sure about his feelings for her, but this was an episode to show that yes, he cares about her deeply, and she was his trigger for remembering who he is.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing, the subplot in this
Oh yeah,
episode is, yeah, is about, the radiation from the planet that makes people forget things, influences also like the space around the planet, so it
yes,
starts to affect the ship itself, and most importantly, it affects Ortega's. The
hmm,
subplot is basically about Ortega's kind of, she's kind of bummed out that she doesn't get to go on the mission because she's the pilot, and then her remembering that she is the pilot kind of gets them out of the situation,
right.
because she drives them away to safety.
Yeah, it's kind of entertaining to watch everybody just, like, wandering aimlessly on the ship. Like, who am I? Why am?
Yeah,
Where am I? What's happening? But then the ship, of
exactly.
course, is in a very dangerous position in orbit with all this, let's say, orbital debris. And so if somebody forgets to pilot the ship, especially somebody who's talented and can keep them from crashing into things, the ship is obviously going to get destroyed. So it really is sort of like a partial Ortegas episode too, because it's about her pep talking herself into, like, what is the thing about her that is most important to her. It's being a pilot, and that she can do what nobody else can do in her mind.
Yeah, yeah, but at the
Yeah,
same time, it's kind of like that's the only thing you could think about her. Like that's
yeah,
the only thing that matters about her, that she's the pilot.
I know.
It's a little depressing.
So this was, to me, yeah, I agree. This is definitely like your traditional episodic Star Trek episode. You know, dealing with violation of the Prime Directive and amnesia and all kinds of stuff is entertaining.
Yeah,
So episode 5, charades.
charades. Oh, this is a good one. Spock and Chapel get in a shuttle accident where this super intelligent incorporeal alien fixes them because they were hurt in the accident, but it doesn't fix them correctly. It just assumes that Spock is human and it makes him fully human, um, which is a problem, especially now because Spock has to have this super important dinner with T'Pring's parents. T'Pring being his fiance, of course.
It's like a meeting of
Um,
the parents. If they want to get
exa-
engaged, they have to get their parents, like, blessing.
exactly. And T'Pring's mother is very traditional Vulcan, and she's already kind of unsure about this, marriage. and there is no possible, of course, there is no possibility to postpone it. So Spock chooses to kind of pretend he's still half Vulcan and just kind of power through it. And luckily, his mother, Amanda Grayson, comes in to help him out a bit. Meanwhile, Chapel kind of tries to contact the alien again to get them to change Spock back. Um, it's a funny episode. It is a mostly funny episode. Seeing Spock kind of,
Hmm.
it's a comedy of errors. Spock kind of tries to pretend to be he's most Vulcan when he's, fully human. Um,
Yeah. You know
yeah,
what's interesting here is this is I don't know why they choose to do this, but it's very in the vein of season one's episode where they had the body swap,
yeah,
where T'Pring and Spock actually like switched their Katras and had to pretend to be each other. It's a very, like you said, a very similar comedy of errors where Spock is trying to be as Vulcan as possible when he even physically is not Vulcan in some things. Like he has no control over his emotions. Things are hot when he touches them. He can't
yeah,
control his pain level, etc. Um, but he makes the effort obviously because his engagement with T'Pring is very important to him. Um,
yeah.
Probably the one thing I loved the most about this is Amanda Grayson. I just
She was great. Yeah,
I just really enjoyed the actress who played the character, and just the more insight we got into seeing how it would be to be a human partner to a Vulcan in Vulcan society, and I love seeing like Spock and Amanda's relationship was nice.
yeah. I think I like the story basically started out as kind of sort of very comedic, but it got more and more serious as the episode went on. And in this episode, Spock really realized what his mother has been
Hmm.
put through. Living on Vulcan, in Vulcan society, being judged constantly, and having
Hmm.
to, you know, jump through hoops to please everyone around her, basically.
And also, let's just point out Spock got to use the Spock ears.
Yeah, he got to use the Spock ears.
Such good meta.
Yeah. But things get really serious toward the end of the episode when, of course, the dinner is success and he convinces T'Pring's parents, but then he gets to talk to T'Pring and tell her what was going on. And T'Pring is, of course, a lot less amused because, why didn't he just tell her what was going on? Why did he have to lie to her?
Yeah.
And, she has a very good point. Why did he lie to her?
Yeah, why didn't he just trust her with the situation? She's his partner.
Exactly. And meanwhile, of course, Chapel is trying to contact these aliens again, and these aliens are basically like the worst customer service aliens in the universe.
Exactly. It's like calling customer support. They're Kirkovians.
Yeah,
They disappeared and they were trying to figure out where they went, and it turns out there's this vortex, and it's like this, the vortex kind of like connects them to the other plane where the Kirkovians went. Except if you want to go through the vortex, you have to talk to customer service first.
yeah,
It's like, please hold while we find someone, an agent who will talk to you.
exactly. And they push and they push and they push her until she finally admits she has feelings for Spock, of course.
Right, and therefore she is an appropriate party to put in a claim that they have made a mistake and that they need to fix Spock.
Yeah. So in the same episode, but T'Pring is, of course, T'Pring is so upset that she kind of dumps Spock.
Yeah,
And at the same time, Chapel is finally admitting that she has feelings for Spock. So this kind of aligns.
yeah.
Um,
It's a significant change in Spock's relationship status.
yep.
Yep.
And it's also interesting that they choose to have T'Pring and Spock separate now. Do you
Yeah.
think they'll be back together? Um, we know that by the time the original series time rolls around, they're not really back together. They haven't gotten married yet, which is why they have the whole ceremony. Um, and they do not seem to be, romantically involved anymore. So I'm wondering if Strange Jones will get them back together at some point, just to split them off again.
I mean, to follow the canon, it would need to. Unless this time apart that she says they need to take, from her side, she doesn't consider them completely split up, but like Spock does.
Spock definitely does. I think she does too.
Yeah,
What I'm wondering is if they will get back together again.
yeah. Oh no.
Because they could just have them separate from now forever, but they made her, such a big character in his life. I'm wondering.
Shall we move on? It's a Spock and Chapel episode.
Yeah, Spock gets a lot of focus this season.
So episode 6, Lost in Translation. The Enterprise is at a newly built recharging station. Kind of like a gas station for spaceships. There have been some mechanical issues on the station, so Pella and like number one are down on the station trying to figure out how did they get it up and running because there's a deadline. But essentially what the station does is it like pulls in the um whatever it is that's in the space clouds and converts it into energy that can be used by the nacelles of the ship to power the ships.
Yeah,
Intermittently, Uhura is hearing this strange noise, like static, over her comm, and then she starts to have dissociative episodes, and to hear this noise when she's just like walking down the corridor of the ship until
yeah,
it essentially becomes serious enough that she has a hallucination and ends up in sickbay where Mbinga tries to tell her that she essentially poisoning. It's a common type of poisoning and she just, she needs to take a break and rest. Because to this point, Uhura has been working so hard, she has not been sleeping. And he's like, you should just take a break. I've given you something for it and try to get over it. But it doesn't stop. And it gets to the point where she thinks she's losing her mind. And then they end up encountering another officer, which I forgot to mention at this point. The Farragut is also there.
yeah,
Yeah, so they end up encountering another officer, but this one from the Farragut, who is experiencing the same symptoms as Uhura, and he is actively trying to sabotage the space station or the recharging station,
yeah,
and to the point that he could blow everybody up in the process.
yeah.
So it is a race against time to stop this officer who clearly has lost his mind to all appearances and is trying to blow everybody up. And Uhura, who thinks she is on the way to being exactly like this other officer, only to figure out she is actually her symptoms are contact from an entity being that exists in the space cloud
Yeah,
from which the recharging station is drawing the energy. Because essentially it is drawing in these beings that live in the cloud and killing them or torturing them, and they're trying to find some way to communicate to these human crews that the station they're building is
hurting them.
yeah, is
Yeah,
destroying them. And
yeah,
so she has to convince, of course, Pike, who readily believes her, that the right thing to do is destroy the recharging station so that it no longer kills the life form, and also that she, stops feeling like she's losing her mind.
exactly.
Oh, and Spock and Chapel decide to have an affair.
Yeah,
La'an and Kirk get to meet face to face on the ship, and it's kind of weird from La'an's side.
yeah, yeah. And this episode, it's basically the first time Uhura meets Kirk, and the first time
Yes.
Spock meets Kirk. Yeah,
And Kirk and Uhura develop a rapport, but not immediately, right?
Yeah.
It actually was very in keeping with Abram's verse where Kirk and Uhura meet at the bar and Kirk tries talking to her and she's like, I'm not in the mood for your advances, leave me alone. It was almost an exact repeat of that situation.
Yeah, only this time Kirk didn't try to hit on her, so.
Exactly. He didn't try to hit on her and he was actually, concerned when she had an episode in front of him and tried to hurt him.
Yeah,
And then he believed her and was trying to help her solve the mystery of why she was having these episodes.
exactly. And we got to know more about Uhura and her backstory, her parents, her tragic backstory. Her family died basically in a shuttle crash,
Yeah.
and she haven't really dealt with it. And this kind of hearing voices kind of brought it all back because after their crash, she also had kind of, I guess you could say, PTSD or something of that sort, where she could also hear them, her family members.
hmm Um, this was where you mentioned to me when we talked about it before that we get to see Himmer again, but not in the way that we expected.
Yeah,
Yes, there is a brief vision of Hemmer, but he is badly decomposed. And
yeah,
that is just a result of the communication from the entity beings. But he's not in his best light.
no, no,
Because it kind of starts out like, oh Lord, is she having a vision of zombies? What's going on?
yeah,
Oh, the other thing to mention is we don't get to see Sam Kirk very often, like at
that's true.
all.
That's true.
But he's here, and we get to see him and Kurt and Jim, and it's kind of funny because they're just like your normal siblings, right? They fight.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, honestly, Sam Kirk is kind of. He
There.
doesn't really have a strong. Yeah, he's just kind of there. He doesn't really leave a strong impression.
Yeah, he's certainly not a center stage character, and he doesn't really get his own. As you can see, sort of a theme in this season is like last season, different characters are getting their own story arcs in these episodes. Sam does not.
Yeah, he does not.
So this to me, this obviously is an Uhura episode.
Oh, and well, Lan does meet Kirk again.
Obviously, clearly weird for her to see again Kirk, even if it's not the Kirk she knew that she had started to develop feelings for in that time travel episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the decision? What do you think about the decision of getting Chapel and Spock together?
Well, I'm not a fan of it. It's not because I have a thing against like a Spock Chapel relationship. The way they're going to develop the relationship in the rest of this season, it's going to be very intense for Spock
Yeah.
and Chapel. And then at some point, if we are to follow the Prime Universe canon, they're going to have to split up and then almost go back to being estranged with each other in the same way that Spock will be with T'Pring. It makes me sad because Spock and Chapel are started out as like really good friends, and I'd rather see them like continue that friendship than have it develop into a full blown like relationship and then suddenly have to like have bad blood between them if they break up.
Yeah, I
It makes me
completely agree.
nervous. I don't feel it.
I don't think they'll have bad blood, but I think
No.
I don't like the effect it will have on Spock. But
And then what's interesting is we see that, like in the beginning of season one, when we're introduced to Chapel, she has struggles with like romantic relationships. I mean, in the beginning, it seems like she's afraid of committing in relationships, right? And it
mhm,
makes me nervous because to Spock, having a romantic partner is not like a fling. While I think Chapel likes him more than that, he's in a more vulnerable position than she is because he is struggling with controlling his emotions. From regular TOS, There are people who like the idea of like Chapel and Spock getting together.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
gonna like
yeah,
this.
but well, I mean, yes, but also like Chapel and TOS barely had a personality.
I know. I know she barely had a personality. She's definitely got one here, and she's a pretty strong character. The way they're
Yeah,
writing her in this show, like,
which is honestly what. Yeah, which is honestly kind of why I'm disappointed in just trying to shove her into a romantic story because
yeah,
it feels a little too rushed.
yeah. I don't know.
I, I personally would have liked another season of them just being friends.
Yeah. I think we agree on that. I think them being friends is better, at least for
Yeah,
season two. Agree. I think it's rushed. It's rushed. It's
yeah,
like Spock breaks up with T'Pring in the at the end of the last episode, and then he's making out with Chapel in the next one.
yeah,
I don't know. It's a little bit of whiplash, even though you
yeah,
could kind of see that was where they were pushing the narrative.
yeah.
Um,
I just think they could have stretched it for another season, let their
mhm,
feelings kind of build, and then maybe in season three do
mhm.
all of this.
Well, maybe we just characterize it this season as like impulsive and passionate for both of them, really. I mean, well, maybe
Yeah,
not so much for Chapel because she's had feelings for Spock for a while, but he's been with somebody else this whole time.
exactly. And it's kind of weird that he gets over to Pring so fast.
Yeah. I think he's very
Um,
susceptible to how strongly he feels and the fact that he can't control that to a degree that
yeah,
he's used to. That has played to me. It played a lot into his impulsiveness, and it did like in the first episode, right, where he's like, "Oh, we're gonna steal the Enterprise." Really, Spock? You're not even gonna take a small second there to think about the rules like you normally do. They're both. I
yeah,
guess you could say like they're both not in the best headspace for a relationship.
exactly. Okay, so next episode.
Episode 7, These Old Scientists.
Yeah, the crossover episode. This episode is a crossover between Star Trek Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds. Basically, the two most popular Star Trek shows currently, I think. Um, it's interesting because one of them is animated and one of them is not. But I think they do a pretty good job of melding them in that characters kind of because Lower Decks happens in the future of Star Trek. They kind of do this effect where when a character moves in time, so when they go back in time, they become live action, and when they move to the future, they become animated. So it's kind of cute. Yeah, basically, the Cerritos sends our four favorite ensigns, Boimler, Mariner, Tandy, and Rutherford, on a mission to see an old time portal that basically is assumed to not work. And apparently it does work because Boimler manages to fall through it straight into Strange New Worlds and meet the crew of the original Enterprise and be nerdy about it because he's a Pike fanboy, because of course he is. um, and then when they try to bring him back, Mariner crosses over instead of him going back home, and basically it's just really funny. It's just a very funny, cute episode um, where Boimler and Mariner kind of mess up stuff for the Strange New Worlds crew.
She gets to see one of her favorite people, Uhura,
Yeah.
just
And
like
it turns out
Boimler.
Aurora is kind of a bummer.
and
She's
and
like,
at this point in time, we talked about how emotional Spock is, especially now that he's in a
yeah.
relationship with Chapel. Boimler originally thinks he broke Spock.
Yeah.
He's like, he smiled at me, or he laughed, like, what's happening? What did I do? I just ruined my
Yeah,
favorite person.
exactly. Um, it's a very fun episode. I was surprised that it wasn't like despite it being a crossover episode and mostly fun, it did have an effect on the plot, of the general plot of Strange New Worlds. basically, Mariner kind of teaches Uhura to be more, less uptight, shall we say, less uptight,
How to have fun.
uh, and have fun, because that's what Mariner does. That's Mariner for you. Um, and Boimler, on the other hand, messes Chapel and Spock's relationship, where basically, because he's freaking out about Spock smiling at him, he goes and he tells Chapo that Spock in his time, the Spock that he's known in his timeline is very reserved, and she's like, "Oh, so I basically have no effect on him. Good to know."
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
just, usually let things drop that, everybody's telling them to be careful, like, don't tell us anything about the future. And they're like, Boimler, just so many things just slips out. It's
yeah,
hilarious.
it is. They are so bad at keeping it, professional.
Oh, and it's also
Um,
Pike's birthday is coming up, and of course it's a holiday in the future,
yeah,
and
of course.
Boimler knows about it, and everybody else is like, "Wait, Pike's birthday? We should celebrate that."
Yeah.
Oh, and I just love how Mariner keeps calling Spock like the hot Spock, hot Spock.
Hotspot, yeah. I've got to say, the voice actors of Bundler and Mariner, who are playing, live action characters in this episode, they are really good. They,
Yeah.
they are really, really good. I really enjoy watching them.
For me, everything about this episode was enjoyable.
Yeah,
I
me
laughed
too.
so much. I love a good
Yeah,
humorous episode. It didn't take itself seriously. I mean, it was such a light-hearted, hilarious episode. How could you not love it?
ex- exactly. Do you have the classic lower decks humor, and you also have the plots from Stranger Worlds, and they managed to meld them together really, really well.
And I guess you could say they leave the Enterprise crew with a feeling that what they're doing is important
Yeah,
and going to have a
indeed.
positive impact on the future.
Exactly. I mean, they not only affect Spock. I mean, they affect Spock and Uhura probably the most, but they also, encourage Pike to have more, of a connection with his crew.
Una.
Um, yeah, they encourage Una, to feel like she's an inspirational person, basically, in the Star
Mm-hmm.
Trek universe. It's really cute. It's a very cute episode.
I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about it other than it's just hilarious and everybody should go watch it, even if they don't
Yeah,
watch anything else.
exactly.
um, yeah. So, episode 8 Under the Cloak of War.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. I think, kind of in keeping with some of the dark episodes we had in season 1, this is truly, to me, like a dark episode in season 2. It deals with a very, very tough subject. Essentially, this Klingon ambassador, Doc Ra, used to
Yeah.
be is notorious as like the butcher of Jagal, which is during the Klingon War was a like a front line between the Klingons and the Federation, and Jagal was a civilian settlement, and the Butcher of Jagal supposedly is responsible for giving orders to wipe out all those civilians, and a lot of people died. It was just really just awful in the way that, in general, war is awful. And
Yeah.
I mean, it changes people, and that's sort of the theme of this episode. Is that the ambassador Klingon Ra is supposedly a changed man. He has, he's repenting for what he did. He's trying to do good, and he's here to facilitate the, peaceful negotiations between the Klingons and the Federation after such a difficult war. And on the flip side of that, you have many crew members on the Enterprise as they're escorting Ra to where he needs to go. Many of those crew members were part of the front lines of the war or in some way involved, and to them, this is a mass murderer. or someone who is directly responsible for the deaths of many of their loved ones and of innocent people. So
Yeah.
they are supposed to be hosting him on the ship during the journey and diplomatic and courteous to him and trying not to, start another war, essentially. So it's a theme about second chances, forgiveness, like where's the line in you don't ever forget, but are you willing to forgive for for the sake of others? Now we know that Pike is an optimist, right? Pike is a very hopeful person. But people like Chaplin and Binga and Ortegas in particular went through such traumatic experiences that and were in the front lines around all this death and trying to save people that they couldn't and saw the slaughter that happened. To them, just being about Raw is very triggering, right?
Right.
So Raw is he well knows that people, some humans truly hate him and that they don't forgive him and that him being there causes a lot of tension on the ship. But he specifically keeps trying to reach out to Mbinga, who he learned was at Jagal. And this is where we learn about Mbinga's real backstory. He was a medical officer at the front lines, and Chapel joined him at the front lines, and so they spent a lot of time together trying to save people. But Mbinga has another side to him. Apparently, he used to be Black Ops.
Yeah.
He was known as like the Ghost or something like that. So he was a very highly trained Black Ops soldier, very good in hand-to-hand combat, and he had chosen to be the medical officer, but he kept getting pushed to like we need to get rid of this Doc Ra Klingon, like the General Doc Ra, and eventually he chooses to try to assassinate the general. Um,
Yeah.
and Binka sees himself as a highly changed person from the war. In some ways, seeing Ra again, who he did not assassinate during the war because he could not get to him in time, um, is like unfinished business.
Yes.
And it is up to Mbinga to decide, like, should Ra be alive? Does he not have to pay for his crimes, basically? Should there not be some type of justice for all those other innocent people who died and the fact that Mbinga didn't get to stop him when he should have? And is Ra just putting on a front and he really is the same person that he was when he was ordering everybody to be killed? Um, so it's a very dark episode, Soda.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ultimately, Mbinga and Ra are sparring and not sparring, but they're confronting each other, and it comes out that the real butcher of Jagal is Mbinga because he was there to assassinate General Doc Ra, and General Doc Ra's three subordinates got in the way, and Mbinga's the one who killed them, and then Ra escaped and later went on to become the ambassador. Um, so they have a fight, and Ra dies. And it's
Yeah.
kind of left open, like how he died, but it's fairly well assumed that Mbinga, like, stabbed him.
Yeah.
But there is an attempt to cover that up and call it
Exactly.
he was killed in defense because Ra attacked Mbinga. And
Yeah.
that's where we end. It's very dark.
It's very dark. Yeah. Like I said, it's kind of you know I don't like this direction with Mbenga's character very
Yeah.
much. It feels very different from what we saw of him in last season. Um,
When he was so concerned with saving his daughter, you remember when his daughter was they had that entity who was like trying to who made everybody like think they were in a story.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mbinka is very like it is important to save my colleagues, like to do no harm. And like I can't sacrifice these people for even for my daughter.
Yeah.
Um, that's the kind of thing like you come to expect from the chief medical officer, right? Who strongly
Yeah, but
believes in saving people.
yeah, and it sends kind of a weird message. This story of the butcher of Jagal, which Big kills, that is like, so people can change. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's just kind of it's dark in a lot of ways.
And it leaves you wondering, like, you almost get the sense that Doc Raw really was trying to be better.
Exactly.
Even though a lot of people suspected that was not the case, they're like, he really was trying to shed his dark past and be a better person and fix what he broke, in a sense. Or he
Exactly. Yeah, he was like a very important ambassador for peace agreements. So it's like,
want to add here, like, this is really like Mbinga's dark past, but Chapel is right there with him for a lot of it.
yeah,
She's also highly affected by the appearance of this ambassador, who used to be who's called the Butcher of Jagal.
they serve and Jagal together basically.
Basically, yeah. And Spock is trying to understand her, like how she's feeling, but she's very much like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, you can't understand. It was war. You weren't there. You don't know what I went through. So it is
Yeah,
very much a, for those who experienced the horrors of war, it does set them apart from others.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the theme here.
Yeah, I just thought that the message of the episode was very dark, unnecessarily dark, and not really commented on in the episode. And I don't like this direction from Benga.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, how do we put aside our personal feelings for the betterment of everyone? Do we seek justice or do we forgive? And I don't think we got a clear answer. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
that's the answer, is it depends.
yeah, exactly.
Or, we're not as, we can't always be as forgiving as we want to be. Um I don't know. I like to see a bit of hope at the end of the, like a light at the end of the tunnel with these Star Trek episodes, and this one left me feeling very cold.
Yes, I agree. Um, that's so next episode.
Yeah. Episode 9, Subspace Rhapsody.
That's kind of a mood whiplash from last episode.
Completely different.
Yeah. This is the first musical episode that Star Trek has ever done.
Fully a musical.
Yeah.
Um, so the Enterprise has encountered this new and amazing subspace fold, and naturally they want to test some things on it, because as you do
Yeah.
with things you don't really understand. They're trying to see how quickly they can relay messages, kind of use it like a super internet speed, like high speed, right?
Yeah.
It's the equivalent.
Exactly.
So what would take them weeks to get a message back to home base could potentially be an instant relay if they can figure out how to use this subspace fold to facilitate that communication or that relay. Kirk is back.
Rick is back.
Kirk is shadowing the crew, or specifically shadowing like Pike and Una,
Yeah.
because he is going to move up in rank eventually, and this is a good opportunity for him. And then, of course, we have Chapel, who has just learned that she got the fellowship with Dr. Corby,
Yeah.
which is a familiar name from the original series. Um,
Yep.
so Chapel has good news, but she hasn't told Spock. And then we have Spock and Uhura, who are trying to test this array. Well, their first few tests didn't really get any results. So as they were talking, and Engineer Pella was there, they kind of came up with the idea of sending a song through the subspace fold. Well, this turns out to be a mistake. because almost as soon as they do that, there's some kind of backlash, and they break into song when they're starting to just have a normal conversation. Instead, suddenly they're singing.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically they discover that they have somehow unzipped a musical reality, and it's like a kind of spreading like a disease to the rest of the
Yeah.
Federation and others, and that they need
People
to,
start expressing themselves through
yeah,
song.
and they need to zip it back up, which doesn't work at first, and then potentially like blow it up. Like they're really
Yeah.
desperate to stop singing. But in keeping with musicals, of course, they can have a sort of a normal conversation, but when emotions get really high, and or they're having like internal thoughts that they don't necessarily share with everybody else, they sing it because that's what happens in musicals.
Yes.
So they kind of have to stop what their normal methods of trying to fix what they broke and kind of do it from a musical reality logic, which is if we all come into a grand finale and sing together to a certain harmonic level, we will have satisfied the musical reality rules, and we will break it, break ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
So, yes, this whole entire episode, everybody gets a song. Pike keeps looking around, kind of horrified at his crew. Everybody else is like, they keep singing, "Why am I singing? Why am I rhyming? What's happening?" Pike embarrassingly gets to listen to Captain Battelle sing to him. He sings back.
Yeah.
They're like their personal relationship for the whole bridge crew to see.
Yeah. And sadly, Anderson Mount is not a very good singer. And you kind of
No.
can tell.
Whereas number one is like, oh, I've always secretly wanted to like be on Broadway. let me just break out in the song.
Of course.
It's just really funny.
Yeah.
And then of course it actually starts to spread to the Klingons. And it's kind of time sensitive that they figure out how to get themselves back to normal, because the Klingons are really offended because it's a dishonor to be singing on their ship, singing to each other instead of whatever their normal thing is. So they're all headed to the subspace vault to blow it up, which will probably just kill everybody. So but eventually, they Uhura, being the having such a musical talent anyway, and then of course, is able to like figure out like how to get the resonance just right. So, but yeah, it ends with them basically doing a final musical number. All of them, the whole crew.
Yeah.
I love how she starts humming their finale song at the very end, like once they're fixed, and everybody looks at
Yeah.
her kind of like in horror, like, "Oh God, is it starting again?" Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a nice, it's a cute little episode. I think the biggest plot thing we get in this episode is Spock and Chapel. Probably.
Uh huh.
Um, Spock finds out that Chapel has this fellowship that she wants to take, which will basically have her be off the ship. Where she will need like a few months, like half a year, no, 6 months, something like that.
Hmm.
Or is it more than a year? I don't
It's
remember.
it's three
It's a long
months. I
3
mean,
months.
originally they said in the beginning it was like a 3 months fellowship.
Yeah. So basically, it's a long fellowship away from the ship and away from Spock. And considering how new the relationship is, it's kind of like kind of breaking up with him basically. And he sort of finds out about it by accident. It's not like she tells him personally. She just sings about it to the entire like lounge, and he overhears it. Um,
I mean, well, they all get in on the musical number.
yeah.
um,
Which again,
yeah.
you have Spock break up with T'Pring in one episode, then gets with Chapel the very next episode, then breaks up with her like 2 episodes later. this is so rushed. This is just so rushed. I don't understand this. Um, but yeah, it was a nice opportunity for some of the actors to show off their singing chops. Mostly, I think Uhura and Laan's actors were the best ones.
What's your overall take of the episode? Is it just supposed to be a silly episode like the one in season 1 where they all think they're in the story?
I don't think it's a silly episode. I think it's more in the vein of the Lower Decks crossover, where
Mhm.
it's mostly fun, but there are like plots to be had. So we have this. We also have this is where I was taken earlier. This is where Lan finds out that Kirk, this universe Kirk, is kind of taken at the moment. And we get our first Carol mention, but it is mostly fun. I think. I mean, it's a musical.
I'm going to confess something. Don't think too awful of me, but I don't like musicals. This was a very painful episode for me.
I see.
I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but when people like break into song, like when you have a whole like when you go to watch a movie and it's mostly musical, it's
Yeah.
it's a lot for me. I had to get up and do some things when they started singing because I mean it was great because the songs were very relevant to what was going on and like their inner monologue. But at the same time, they were all singing and doing things, and I was like, I can't watch.
Well, I'm not the biggest fan of musicals, but I'm not like as turned off by them as you are, like, apparently. But I will say I was kind of disappointed because none of the songs were really catchy to me. Like,
Mhm.
I can't really hum any of them right now if you ask me. Like none of them really caught on. And it's kind of disappointing because if you have a musical, you better have great songs in it.
Okay, so shall we move on to the last episode?
Yeah, let's do this.
Episode 10, Hegemony.
Hegemony, yeah. So this is the return of the Gorn. Remember the Gorn? We haven't talked about the Gorn all season.
We haven't, I mean, there's been some hints that there was a war brewing,
Yeah,
but we have not really seen or heard from the Gorn this whole season. That's true.
yeah. Um, so Chapel broke up with Spock last episode, and now she's heading out to her fellowship. And she to do that, she goes on the Cayuga, which is the ship of the girlfriend of Batel, basically Pike's girlfriend. They visit a colony, which is then attacked by the Gorn. But the Starfleet generals kind of tell Pike to stay out of it. But of course, when he hears that Patel and Chapel are there, he takes his crew and they go save them, basically, or try to anyway. It's a Gorn episode. It's suspenseful and tense
Dark,
and a lot of action and
bloody,
dark. Yeah,
it's a monster
exactly.
episode.
The monster episode. Oh, that's a Gorn episode,
Yeah.
basically.
We get to see a
Yeah,
full grown adult Gorn.
yeah, that's true. Not just an adult Gorn, but a scientist Gorn, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, we
which
get
is
to see
interesting
like the
because
equivalent to a soldier, and then, yeah, it's interesting. They're terrifying.
yeah, but they are intelligent. Like up until now in this series, the Gorn are basically animals, which is kind of weird because they have ships and stuff. Like,
I mean, they figured out how they communicate with each other. Like, why
yeah,
would they think that they're just completely unable to? Like, why would they think they're not intelligent? Clearly, they are.
I don't think they think they're unintelligent, but up until now, they kind of were presented as like basically animals. Like, all they do is very animalistic and based on instincts and stuff.
Yeah, and there's no way to like actually communicate with them specifically to talk about we don't want to have a war with you. Let's come to some kind of agreement.
Yeah.
But the Gorn specifically, they draw like the demarcation line between like the border and Federation space, and are like, look. I mean, they're
Yeah.
very clear in their intentions, um, and like marking what territory is theirs. To be honest, we don't even get a resolution here.
Yeah, it ends in a cliffhanger like last season. This time it's a more interesting cliffhanger, honestly. Basically, Pike and his crew managed to get to the survivors from the Cayuga and the colony. Battelle and Chapel, of course, among them. Um, there's also another character there, one Montgomery Scott, Mr. Scotty, who is an engineer prodigy, unsurprisingly, who is very helpful in keeping them safe from the Gorn with a cloaking device. Basically, we discovered that Patel was infected with Gorn eggs, but half of the crew gets captured, and basically the cliffhanger is first of all how to rescue the crew, and second of all what to do with Patel.
And also, they're getting attacked the full-on Gorn battleship.
Yeah,
So and they have orders from the Federation side to retreat, basically.
yeah. Well, they were told not to go there in the first place,
Well,
but yeah,
right, but yeah, Pike's in quite a quandary there.
yeah.
But to be clear, like the crew who's captured, it's Sam Kirk, La'an, Mbinga, and then all those civilians and probably some crew members of the Cayuga, which is Batel's ship.
Yeah. Spock and Chapel weren't captured too. I think they were.
Okay. Well, I mean, all I remember is I didn't think about that, but they might have been. They were in space.
They were in space, yeah. Oh, they killed the Gorn, so maybe he didn't capture them.
You
Um,
know what? No, they didn't get captured. They were on the Enterprise because yeah, she came back. They beamed them back to the ship when
yeah,
they
yeah,
destroyed that, and they were happy to see Chapel, and she's the one who put Battelle in under sedation in a containment
yeah,
field.
yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, we have captured crew members. We have an important person to fight who is infected with Gorn eggs. Um, and we have a season three that will take a long time to come. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
really, this finale episode is not um it's not a finale in the sense that it's tying up some major plot point from the whole season. It's launching us into what's going to probably be the next season
yeah, that's true.
because they have avoided like outright saying like there's going to be war with the Gorn. It's been very secretive, right? I mean, Pike obviously knew something, like he was in the know because he even had like weapons on his ship that Starfleet had been developing in order to actually fight the Gorn and level the playing field. It's been sort of super secretive all season, I guess, that like there's something coming with the Gorns, and this is where the finale sort of lands us is, oh, now it might actually happen.
Yeah,
And probably with casualties. So, in the back of my mind, I was wondering, we don't get a lot of Sam Kirk all season. I mean, he's just there to like kind of like have some arguments with his brother, and he decided to go down to the Gorn, to the colony, right into the thick of it, and it ultimately ends up getting captured. I mean, we know that like Sam Kirk eventually leaves Starfleet.
yeah,
If we follow canon, he's gonna survive, but like maybe this is the thing that like puts him over the edge.
yeah. It's possible. I mean, in the previous episode where he and Kirk kind of argue, we learned that a lot of their issues come from trying to live up to their father's expectations.
Yeah,
And maybe this is the thing that kind of makes him go, I don't need to do that. I just need to do what makes me happy.
yeah. I just need to go do
Basically.
sciency things as a civilian or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
for a company or a corporation.
Yeah.
I also consider the fact, what if they throw it in there like he meets his future wife? She was like a colonist that survived.
Yeah, maybe.
That would be
Maybe. I mean,
interesting.
it will also be kind of depressing. They survive one colony to be killed in another.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
yeah. This is going to be triggering for La'an to be
Yeah.
recaptured by the Gorn. But also in
Yeah.
Bingo, who we now know is, well, I mean, we know he's useful in a fight if he chooses to be, but he is very much struggled the whole season with his dark side.
Exactly.
And so this is, this could clearly like bring that out to the forefront if he's, in another situation where he's confronted with behind enemy lines. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of emotional stakes. That's where the finale leaves us.
Exactly.
What do you think about Spock and Chapel though? Because she was gonna leave for the Fellowship, and she was just doing this one last thing before she got on the shuttle to go. And then obviously, like, there's this. They thought she was dead for a majority of the episode. And
Yeah.
then Spock finds her. Like, what's gonna happen with them?
I think it's pretty obvious Chapel is going to take that fellowship.
Yeah,
We all know that she and Corby end up being engaged.
yeah.
Um,
So maybe this is just a way to like get them to actually say goodbye to each other before she leaves for the
yeah.
Fellowship. Like, to make
Yeah, it's
Spock feel
possible.
less, to make Spock be able to like actually have a conversation with her before she leaves, so they don't leave it like open ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. I had to say it the whole time. I was wondering, like, when's the Farragut gonna show up? Isn't Kirk usually in the thick of these things? I mean, he has been. You were right in your prediction for season 1 that we would see more of Kirk, because we certainly did
Yeah.
this entire season.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I'm guessing he's only going to be more central from here on out.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that we'll see like next? If, obviously, Chapel is going to stick around for a few episodes next season, but do you think we'll have like Chapel last episodes where she is off on her fellowship?
I mean, she should be. I mean, unless they do like a time skip. Um,
Yeah.
but to be honest, like if she goes for a 3-month fellowship with this Dr. Corby and they get engaged, like if they get engaged at that time, maybe she'll stay longer. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of always, I didn't ever think like the work that she did with Dr. Corby was a short period of time. I don't know.
Mhm.
A lot of questions.
Yeah. And what do you think will happen to Patel?
Oh, wow. I just don't see that ending well.
Yeah.
Um, unless, I mean, they would have to literally find a way at the last minute to like destroy the eggs, or like, but without destroying the host. And when those eggs are, when the whole thing's done incubating, they literally rip their way out of people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I can imagine like how much damage is done just by them incubating in a human body that's not meant to hold them. Medically, I don't see how they could save her.
Yeah, I agree.
Which, of course, this could potentially put Pike in a position to have hard feelings against the Gorn in the way that, like, Kirk did in the original series against the Klingons, like, once when his son died. I don't know. But we know that, like, Pike was the one who was thinking, how do we communicate with the Gorn? Surely there's a way we can, if we could just communicate with them, that we could very clearly tell them we're not trying to take over their territory. Or
Yeah. I don't. Honestly, the first season made the Gorn so
monstrous.
monster-like. Yeah. They then kind of, and combine this with the episode about the butcher of Jagal this season, about how people can change. I'm wondering where they're going with this. I can see them going to a very dark place with this.
Yeah. I don't know.
Um, yeah. So overall, I think, like we said at the beginning, I think this season is good, but just not as good as the first one.
Hmm.
I didn't hate any episode, but I don't think there was like. I think my favorite episode was the crossover episode.
I love the crossover episode. I knew I would. It's just fun, but at the same time,
Yeah,
if I'm looking for like I'm going to put that one inside into like a category of its own. So if I don't include the crossover one, which I knew would be great, probably my
yeah,
favorite one is Charades. And
yeah. That one was
primarily
also
because
great.
of Amanda Grayson and just the hijinks of like Spock just being like an emotional teenager.
Yeah, I think I really hope this show doesn't go into too dark places,
Yeah.
because the point of Star Trek, the hopeful future and to see the good in people and believe that things can be better. And this is a kind of veered into some darker places that I don't feel like were very right for it.
Yeah. Luckily, I think we have the right captain for the show because Pike is very hopeful.
Do you think he will remain this way if something happens to Patel?
That's where I was like, that I was wondering that. That's why I kind of said like, is he in a situation like Kirk in the original series was? Um, I hope not because he was not in a good place when he realized like when his own death would be in the beginning of season one, and he chose to put that aside and just do the best with the time that he has, and that means fulfilling the mission of Starfleet and living up to the ideals of the Federation. So I would hate to see him walk back on that because of
Yeah,
some
me too.
personal, loss. I think, I think he's gonna. I hope and I want to see him be the the better man,
Yeah, me too.
no matter what happens. And I feel like we have gotten to observe that on and off in the first two seasons, that he has it in him to not let, if Batel dies, to not let Batel's death drive him to a dark place for too long.
Yeah, I agree.
Mbinga, I don't know. I feel like Mbinga's got a breaking point. I think his path is only going to get darker, and it's going to get such that he probably has to take a step away from what he does, which is heal people. And maybe he's gonna have to leave like actually active like Starfleet duty to heal himself. I think that's where his arc is headed.
Maybe I really hope not. I hope honestly I hope to see him do better.
I do want him to do
Um,
better, but I feel like
I
narratively
really
it
just
gets gonna get worse before it gets better for him specifically.
yeah, maybe.
I see La'an, she just continues to get better in the sense that she's learning how to open up, to trust
Yeah,
people, to talk about like
that's
this
true.
her feelings, to actually lean on people. And I feel like her facing the Gorn is going to prove to herself that she's stronger than she ever was, even when she was held captive, originally held captive by the Gorn. So I think she's going to come out the other side stronger.
Yeah, that is yeah. I that's the one thing I'm sure of too.
Yeah.
Her story is going to make her stronger.
I also love Uhura's like arc this season. She's obviously very talented, and because of that talent, she's been promoted to ensign on the Enterprise, given a very important position as like head of communications almost. She works herself really hard. She may not be as close to people as you would think because of some personal loss that she's experienced in her life. She's a lot like La'an in that way.
Yeah,
It is very nice to see her come out of her shell, through the course of the season and one, loosen up a little bit. Thanks, Mariner. But also just
Yeah,
realize her place on the ship, because originally season 1 is like, do I even belong in Starfleet? I just came here because I needed somewhere to go. And now we see that by the musical episode, she's realized that the role that she has, and the work that she's doing is important, and she is that like connection between people on the ship.
yeah,
So I'm really glad to see her like find her place, and I hope that continues.
yeah. Me too. I think um, I want to say something. I forgot. Well, I mean, last season she was close to Hammer, and I think like
Yeah.
she experienced this loss on top of the loss of her family, so we can understand where she's coming from. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
she's definitely going to become more outgoing and
Yeah.
friendly.
And just a
Um,
really good, I think, empathetic person,
yeah,
um, to others, and of course, genuinely talented in what she does.
yeah, of course.
um, that's without a doubt. So I hope to see more of Uhura in the next season. I really enjoyed her growth, like from a cadet
Ye-
to an ensign.
Yeah, definitely,
And I'd love to
definitely.
see her eventually be promoted to lieutenant. That would be great.
Yeah.
So we talked about Pike, Laan, and Binga. Kind of talked about Chapel. So what about Spock?
Well, Spock is Spock. Spock kind of steals the spotlight all the time.
Yeah.
I actually kind of hope they tone down Spock stories next season.
Yeah.
There is so much Spock out there already. They can use him less. We
Mhm.
don't need a lot more Spock. I hope Una kind of her story kind of ended in episode 2,
Mhm.
which is kind of we touched upon it a little in the crossover, but she doesn't really have much to do after that. Um, I hope they find Ortega something to do besides being the pilot. She seems like a fun character. She should have more things to do.
And clearly, we might get a new addition to the crew.
Yeah, well,
Montgomery
Scotty's here
Scott.
now. Yeah.
Do you think they'll have like Pella leave the ship since she was temporary anyway, or is she gonna like stay and kind of mentor Scotty a little bit since he is like Lieutenant Junior grade?
Well, she might stay. I hope she stays. Actually, I think it's
Yeah.
going to be a fun dynamic. But honestly, I think she's going to leave very soon.
Mhm.
If I had to guess, I'd say she'd be stick around for like an episode or two and then leave.
Okay. Okay. Did we miss somebody?
Mm, well, there is T'Pring, which is kind of a
Uh.
major minor character. I hope she comes back. I mean, there's the whole story from last season with, Sibak, which we didn't get any attention at all this season.
No, that's true.
Um,
I feel like they're gonna bring to Pring back at least one episode next season if they don't like
yeah,
have her reconcile with Spock. Um,
yeah, I think so too. They're probably going to find a reason that is
yeah.
not related to Spock to bring her back.
But please let them bring back Amanda Grayson. Preferably with Sarek,
um,
because Spock has readily admitted he is not in a like on a speaking terms with his father. And while I know that's kind of like canon and sort of the what's happening when he meets his father in Journey to Babel, but it would be very entertaining to see like Sarek Amanda Grayson couple again.
yeah,
That's just a
that's
wish for
true.
me.
That's true.
We're good. Obviously, like we said, going to probably see more of Kirk. Um,
Yeah.
they're going to have to think up more reasons for him to be leaving the Farragut when he's trying to get promoted to first officer.
Was he promoted to first officer in the last
I think he
episode?
was, but like the fact that they let him leave for a while to shadow Pike
Yeah.
made me question, are you first officer on probation? Like a 90-day trial period? What's going on?
Yeah.
um
Well, do you think maybe they'll have like an actual story for Sam?
no, I don't. I think Sam is on his way out. Like I said, I
Yeah.
because they have shown the tension between the brothers at times. Um maybe they'll have another episode where like Sam survives the Gorn, being captive with the Gorn, and like he and Kirk actually get to show how much they really care about each other. It's not like joking, like, oh, I heard you miss me, kind of like, oh, I would never miss you, kind of thing. I don't know. I feel like they
Yeah.
need to. I feel like they need to do one more thing to solve that thread. Before they
Yeah,
send
maybe like
Sam off into wherever.
yeah, exactly.
Wonder if we'll get a new character next season.
Well, I think Scotty is gonna be like the new guy next
I mean, he
season.
is new.
Yeah, he's not new.
He's not new.
He's not. Yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Maybe Dr. Corby becomes a character.
Oh Lord, what if he comes back to the Enterprise like with Chapel? She's like, I brought back my fiance.
I mean, he could come to visit her. She is his fiance.
That's what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
Before he goes off on some archaeological expedition where he vanishes.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Klingons. We saw them. Well, we saw it come up again, like about the Klingon War, but just in general, I think I've really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the way they've put together the Klingons in this show. I mean, we've talked about this before. Like, they're probably one of the most developed alien species in Star Trek franchise.
Yeah.
Um, so I enjoy seeing them like continue to add to that and like carry it through, even if it is in a less, peaceful time.
I wouldn't mind if the Klingons pop up once a season, but I don't think they
Yeah,
should be given too much screen time because, like we said, they're so developed.
yeah.
There
I
isn't
don't
really
think they
much
will get
point.
a lot of screen time at all, but I think we'll continue
Yeah.
to have them like pop up here or there as reminders of the past and the the rising tensions with the Klingon Empire, because things never completely settle, right?
Yeah.
After the war, even into the
Yeah.
original series. Obviously, we're going to see more of the Gorn.
Yes.
But if they were, let's just say for the sake of season 3, they get close to war with the Gorns, and then the Gorns, let's say, realize that the Federation can actually stand up to them and or like fight them, and so the Gorns kind of retreat to their own territory, right? And so, for the sake of the Gorn villain race, they eventually go away. And then we don't see them again
Yeah.
until the original series. Who in the world would replace the Gorns?
That's a good question.
I mean, what if like early on they decide to like resolve the situation with the Gorns like halfway through season 3?
There are other species. I mean, they could be maybe they could give some attention to the Tholians, which are also a original series species that kind of was mentioned once off and never again. Um,
Well, it won't be the
you know,
Romulans.
no, not the Romulans, obviously.
That would really break canon.
Yeah,
Even though we did see the Romulans in a time travel episode.
yeah, but no,
Yeah.
that's I also Picard dealt with the Romulans, and the Romans aren't that interested, honestly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think they couldn't find other species, but like, they are setting up the Gorn to be the big bad villains of Strange New World, so
Yeah.
they probably have a plan for them. Yeah, it does. It kind of doesn't make sense considering Kirk didn't even know who they were.
Right. But I don't know that I want a Star Trek show to have like a full season of war. I don't feel like I want Strange New Worlds to be fully focused on like war efforts or like preparing for a war that's coming. Um, because like we already saw that in Deep Space Nine. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I would prefer
and
that they go back to being more about a show about exploration of the unknown.
yeah, I mean, we also saw this in Discovery. more recently. Yeah, we don't need again. We really don't.
Yeah, we don't.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
The darker episodes, the ones that reference, invasion and war, potential war coming, those really kind of turn me off to the show
yeah.
because I want more lighthearted new species. Come on, give me the comet people again.
Mm-hmm.
you know, those things are entertaining. So,
Yeah.
and I can only deal with like the political intrigue on the side. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm with you. I want more one-off episodes, more episodes about exploration and cool sci-fi concepts, and less war and stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what we think. Anything else to add?
I don't think so. Again, I would recommend that if you've seen season 1 of Strange New World, season 2 is worth the watch.
Exactly.
And we continue to be hopeful that season 3 will live up to its predecessors.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well, thanks everyone for listening. And if you've got some thoughts or opinions or comments about um, Strange New World season 2, just let us know.
Yeah. And thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.